mankind lived just like the animals. Then something happened, which unleashed the power of our imagination. We learned to talk. We learned to listen. Speech has allowed the communication of ideas, enabling human beings to work together. To build the impossible. Mankind's greatest achievements have come about by talking.
Yes, so hello and welcome in a special interaction, a special program, The Champions, where I have with me Dr. Arun Mehta sir and Vickram Crishna sir. And as we just heard from the great man himself, Dr. Stephen Hawking, just as we heard him reiterating that ability to talk is the one attribute that sets apart the mankind from the rest of the living species. Dr. Arun Mehta and Vickram Crishna sir are the two gentlemen, are the two paladins, they are the two giants, they are the Samaritans, they are the champions who enabled Dr. Stephen Hawking to talk and to express himself through a special software program, the eLocutor. So, welcome sir, a very warm welcome to both of you. Thanks for accepting my invitation. So sir, kindly tell me, how did it all start? How did you meet Dr. Stephen, and how did it all began?
Professor Hawking used a hardware text-to-speech unit called a deck talk, which produced speech of that characteristic Stephen Hawking voice that we know so well. However, sadly, that was, even then, I'm talking 20 years ago, that was outdated hardware. Nobody made it anymore. And if the units that Professor Hawking had were to break down, he'd have no voice left. So our software was to be a backup. So it ran under Windows and it used the Windows standard SAPI speech API so that we had flexibility in what kind of voice to use with the software. But Professor Hawking liked the voice that he had, and so he continued to use his old software and hardware during his entire life. eLocutor was his backup. Now, the challenges in writing eLocutor were, well, first of all, we hadn't written software like that before. The only spec that we were given was the one line that Stephen can only press one button. So now we had to figure out a way not only to be able to type sentences and paragraphs and monographs and whatever length of text Professor Hawking may choose to write, to convert it to speech. But what was very important was that the software be as efficient as possible. Even that one button that Professor Hawking could press cost him a great deal of effort because his muscles were very weak and dying, basically. So, trying to predict how to complete the word that he was typing, how to complete the sentence that he was typing, different ways to convert sentences that he had written before into new sentences. We tried to build in a lot of intelligence, and finally we reached a success level of about 0.8, which was that, for each character that he typed, he needed 0.8 clicks, or let's say 8 clicks for 10 characters. So which is actually much better than what you get when you type on a regular keyboard, because, you have 1 click per character and you have a choice among hundreds of keys. So it was quite efficient software, but someone writing the software today would have the benefit of large language models and so on, which would be so much better at predicting what the user might want to type next.
Please tell us that the idiosyncratic voice or the augmented speech, as they call it, was that voice an extension of eLocutor? And what was the eLocutor all about? And what were the challenges that you had to contend with while designing the program?
The question was whether it was necessary to separate out the speech part and the writing part. As it happens, speech part has been part of the computer digital industry for many, many years. The voice that Stephen Hawking uses was developed as one of the very first applications of a mini computer. That's 30 or 40 years ago. So there was no need to develop a voice as such. In addition, Professor Hawking was also extremely used to the voice that he had been using all these years. He liked that voice. So there was no question of developing a voice for him. It was much better to let him continue to use the voice that he was already happy with. However, getting the application to write text easily, and particularly to write quick text so that he could respond quickly to questions or to discussions, that was very important. That was something that his current program did not use, because it was developed, many decades back. With the increased capability of computers, it was possible to write a program that allowed him to very easily compose quick questions, and also to use quick responses, and also to use ready-made responses that were built into the program.
The thing that amazes me the most is the fact that this software program, the eLocutor, didn't just cater to Dr. Stephen's articulation needs, but it could also blend with Dr. Stephen's propensity of looking or seeing the lighter side of things, so to speak. It could blend itself with his propensity of humor. It accommodated his humor as well, beyond catering to his enunciation needs. It accommodated his upbeat personality. I mean, Dr. Stephen wasn't this typical dour-faced scientist, and neither was he an enthusiast. His smile wasn't fake. He was a man full of life, a sprightly, upbeat person. So, sir, kindly put Dr. Stephen into perspective for us. I mean, we know his intelligence and his contribution towards the field of science, but kindly put him into perspective, and if you could quote some examples how his intelligence as a human being shined through in the day-to-day life, so to speak. Please.
The question asks, can you give examples of his upbeat personality? You know, when I met him in Bombay, the purpose of the meeting was to understand how he was composing works on his computer, to actually see what he was doing in order to write. It was a slow process to see him doing that. I was sitting next to him, and very soon after we started, he used the program to crack a joke. I mean, that was so amazing. It was so eye-opening to see that he would use this time, which was meant to be a sort of a boring professional interaction about discovering how his computer program worked. Instead, it became a moment for him to share his personality, to share his love of life, and to share, his love of humor. Many years later, he went on the John Oliver program, and John Oliver is a well-known humorist, Britisher, who works on American television, and he just used that program to highlight his fun-loving personality. I think that's a very good example of what a well-rounded human being he was.
The next question which I'm about to ask you has been nagging me for quite some time. I will explain it to you through an example. I will illustrate it to you through an example. Ignorance is not the enemy of knowledge, but an illusion of knowledge is actual enemy. This is one of the quotes of Dr. Stephen Hawking. My question is, when a person with disability, and especially if he is a child prodigy or even an adult for that matter, whenever he tries to express himself, whenever he says something philosophical, something thoughtful, he is accused of being superficial. His intelligence gets termed as vicarious. People say that it's all well to say or to utter smart things, to utter wise things, but your speech is, or your talk is simply superficial, your intelligence is vicarious, you lack the proverbial depth of your personality, lacks the proverbial depth of experience and practical know-how. So how can a person with disability counter this statement of, or counter this allegation of vicarious intelligence, and how can he continue to celebrate his intelligence without having to worry about whether his intelligence is a vicarious one or an authentic one? Please guide us, please.
I do not share your view that the opinions of disabled persons are considered superficial. I have interacted with disabled persons in many fora. I have taught them. I have worked with them as colleagues on software projects. I have very high opinions myself of the persons I taught and worked with who were disabled. Often when these projects related to disability, they managed to bring a special in-depth knowledge and expertise in the area and also communicate it to others. So we should discuss this separately sometime.
Sir, the next thing that I want to talk about is Stephen Hawking, sir, was a married person. I mean, to quote one of his quotes, those who are wise do not marry, because then they become otherwise. That's what he says about marriage. But he was a married person. He had a family. His daughter was the one who introduced him to the makers of the Simpson show. So for a severely disabled person that he was, he dared to marry, he dared to have a family, because he was a true daredevil. But this is a preposition. A disabled person, a wheelchair user, getting married is a preposition largely unheard of. This is a Bohemian preposition. This is a Bohemian school of thought, especially in our part of the world. But he was a married person, he had a family, and so what I wanted to know is, how did he view this aspect of emotional rehabilitation of people with disability, and how do you view this aspect of emotional rehabilitation and companionship? Because emotional support is just as important as all other worldly things are. So how did he view this aspect? Did he share anything about this with you, or what is your take on this? Because you have worked with many other people with disabilities, not just him, but you have worked with many more people with disabilities. So what is both of your, this question, like all other questions, this question is to both of you, what is your take on emotional rehabilitation of persons with disability?
No, actually, I did not get any chance to discuss his personal life. When I met him in Bombay, in fact, he was there with his nurse. He had come on a professional visit, and that was the only person from his personal retinue, apart from Neil Shearer, who was his personal assistant. These were the only people in his team. So I can't say I spent any time trying to discover his personal life. It was none of my business, and it was not part of the interaction.
My next point of talking is democratization of technology and democratization of assistive technology for the larger section of people with disabilities. What you did was monumental. You designed a special software program to assist an individual. But how can we democratize the availability and the use of assistive technology for the needy section of the society?
This is an excellent question, and the matter is very close to my heart. The democratization of technology and technological development relates not just to persons with disability, although this is extremely important in this case, but to persons who are poor, poverty in general. Wars have so often been won simply by virtue of superior technology. We see that all the time. Now, I am a firm believer that persons with disability must take charge of the technology that is developed to help them. From disabled people, one often hears nothing about us without us. And I would totally apply that to technological development. It is sad that disabled persons often do not see that technology development isn't that hard. The hard part is applying the technology properly, getting the settings, making the adjustments, changing the technology again and again in an interactive process. So this is an area where I actively urge disabled persons to get involved. It is not difficult to write software as a disabled person. Some of the best software programmers in the world are blind people or on wheelchairs and so on. And especially for a poor country like ours, where we don't get much help from the government or from other institutions, it is very important that technology be affordable and accessible to everyone who needs it. So our attempt has always been to use the low-cost, ubiquitous technology that is available all over. Nowadays, for example, we do a technology development. We write apps for Android phones and tablets, which are the cheapest and most easily available computers. which have indeed an incredible amount of power because they have sensors that can sense movement, position, angle, and so on. They can quite easily be programmed. There's a camera, there's audio. So there is a lot of different kinds of input that an app can get. And we, for example, use these to enable people who are not able to speak to use text-to-speech through the phone, not unlike what we did with Professor Stephen Hawking. It was very clear to us, painfully clear to us. I mean, when that even a person like Stephen Hawking finds it difficult to get people to develop technology for him, what the situation in India and other developing countries must be for persons with severe disabilities. And so I'm very, very happy with the opportunities that I have had to work in this space right now, working closely with the ALS Foundation in India. The disease that Professor Stephen Hawking had was also ALS. So in a sense, I have come full circle, but the basic approach has not changed.
Sir, Dr. Hawking deserves all the praise. He surely deserves all the accolades and glory, but the people from the West who supported him, who did not ostracized him, but rather embraced him, they accepted him, they stood by him, they deserve as much appreciation as Stephen himself. So in your view, what is it that we Indians need to learn and adopt from Stephen's life and from looking at the support system of Stephen Hawking and from people in the West? What is it that enables them to see and acknowledge the potential of a person rather than his predicament? What is it that enables them to see beyond a person's physicality rather than judging the book by its cover? What is it that we need to learn and imbibe, and how can we do that?
The question is, why did people from the West accept him so readily? You must remember that by the time he started falling ill, he was already a renowned scientist. He had already made major contributions to the field of science. There was no doubt that people felt very conscious of his amazing mind. They already knew about it. He was not very young when he fell prey to the disease. So I don't think it is right to say they accepted him. Rather, they were part of his life already, and they continued to be part of his life even though he grew ill and it became difficult for him to talk freely. They were there back to receiving him when they realized that he could still, thanks to the software that he was using, participate in discussions and conferences and things like that, which was all part of his professional career. I do not see that as being a problem. There are some amusing stories about his life in Cambridge. He had a kind of mechanized wheelchair which had its own motor, and he was very fond of riding very fast down the road, and in fact the police had to give him warnings not to travel so fast on the roads because it was not easy to see a person in a wheelchair, and he would be going extremely fast on the road. So I think the fact that he was just accepted as another person. This is something that is a tribute to him, to the people around him, and also to his amazing capacity for outstanding thinking.
So, gentlemen, kindly allow me to quickly slip in one more question here, and that is, both of you are immensely experienced individuals in the field of disability, but how can a common man, layman, how can he or she go about or improve their listening skills and patience and empathy quotient? Because when we talk about inclusion, these kind of interactions between an able-bodied person and a challenged person will have to be more frequent. So while interacting with a person like me who takes time to speak, how can a common man improve his listening skills as well as his patience and empathy quotient? Because once people are able to do that, it will help them not only while interacting with disabled people, but it will help them almost everywhere while interacting with anybody. So these two skills are very, very important skill sets which one should have. But where to begin from? How to improve one's own listening skills and patience and empathy quotient? Thank you.
The question is, how can people in the world today who currently do not face any issues with basic speech and movement abilities learn to be more sensitive to people who do have problems with any of these abilities? In some foreign countries, displaying lack of sensitivity and care is a serious civil offense. In many of these countries, ordinary courtesy is also a way of life. Whether the law came first or came as a result of codifying already existing civil courtesy probably needs extensive study. In many ways, but definitely greater in cities, simple courtesies are lacking in Indian society. Even verbal courtesy built into many of our languages does not always extend to physical behavior. I do not think I am qualified to either explain this or to suggest ways forward. All I can say is that if you would like your listeners to hear, is that civil courtesy in both speech and action leads to a better social experience.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me this opportunity to have this interaction was extremely enriching for me, and I'm sure that this is going to be equally enriching experience for our audience also. So, sir, thank you very much. Thank you.